Hello and welcome to Inside Music, episode number 86. I'm your host, James Shotwell, and I hope this finds you well. I had a wonderful weekend myself. I just got married. As many of you know, if you've been listening to the show, this has been a long time in the works, and it was a blast. Several of the guests from the show were there, like Jacob Tinder, and it was just a great time. I mean, it was a wedding. What else would you expect me to say, really? I married the love of my life. Our families were there, our friends, our relatives. It was a great time. And in the back of my mind, not anywhere near the forefront, not that I thought of it on my actual wedding day, but I would be lying if I didn't say that at some point over the weekend, I remembered what was going to happen on Inside Music this week, and I got just a little bit excited. You see, a couple of weeks ago, almost 2 months ago at this point, I had an opportunity to get on the phone with none other than Anthony Raneri, founding member and vocalist guitarist for the band Bayside, to discuss his group's new album, Vacancy, which arrives in stores on August 19th. Now, this was before Bayside really started the promotional cycle for Vacancy. In fact, I believe I was one of the very first people to talk to Anthony about his work on the record. And as a result, I think we were able to have a great in-depth conversation that not a lot of people are able to accomplish. Now, not to say that it's the best interview you've ever heard with Anthony, but the thing that happens when a new album comes out is that an artist gets put into this promotional cycle where their publicist or their label sets up interview after interview after interview, and everyone basically wants to know the same few questions. How did the album come together? What was it like working on it? What do you hope people take away from it? What are your favorite tracks? So on and so forth. Anthony and I cover all of that, but we also get a lot deeper because Vacancy itself is a very deep album. See, Anthony uprooted his entire life and his lifelong home of New York City to move to Tennessee where he could be with his wife and his daughter. Then the marriage fell apart, and Anthony found himself living out of a hotel so that he could see his daughter and still be close to her, but not be in the house that he once shared with his spouse. In that time, he started to write music, and the result of, kind of processing everything that happened to him is what you hear on Vacancy, and him and I get into the nitty-gritty of that. We also talk about some production elements and, sharing the material with the band, but a lot of this is about the human experience of growing up and realizing not everything works out the way you think it's going to, and how you address that, confront that, if you will, and continue to move forward in life. I've never had a conversation like this with Anthony, and I've rarely been able to interview him for as long as I was in this conversation, and I really hope you're gonna really hope you enjoy it. I think it's one of the best episodes of Inside Music we've ever done, and I'm excited to share it with you today. Before we get there are a few quick things I want to tell you. First and foremost, this episode of Inside Music is brought to you by Holix, the music industry's leading digital promotional distribution company. And when you're listening to this, know that the brand new, completely overhauled version of Holix has just been released to the public. This is a completely retooled version of the platform that reimagines the way promotional distribution works in a way that I think streamlines the process and also allows for more customization. For more information on Holix and access to a free 30-day trial, visit holix.com. That's HAULIX.com. I also want to say that you should be following the podcast on Twitter. @InsideMusicPod is your source for updates on upcoming guests, current show tidbits that maybe we had to cut due to time, and a lot of other information related to life in the music industry. Whether you're hoping to work in music one day or you're already in it and you're hoping to keep your head above water, there are links to information through our Twitter account that will help make that easier. Finally, you need to buy this Bayside album. The band has been together almost 20 years at this point, and they keep finding a way to share a side of themselves that few bands ever really are able to tap into. There's a sense of honesty and sincerity in everything Bayside does, and it's never been more clear-cut than it is on Vacancy. I really think people are going to love this album, and I think it opens a lot of doors towards where the band can go in the future. And they're lifers. We get into that in this conversation a bit. Bayside is not going anywhere anytime soon, and I think Vacancy might just be their best release to date. And that arrives in stores August 19th. So I'm going to play a little bit of my favorite song off the album. It's called I've Been Dead All Day. If you've seen the video, you've probably already have learned the song. If not, go onto YouTube, look up the video. It's great. And then I'm going to get into my conversation with Anthony. Thank you so much for listening. Enjoy the show.
Well, I've been dead all day. Could you tell? Could you tell? This is where I leave here and I save myself. If there's a God in hell, let us pray to be cleansed of everything that we've said while I fall asleep. Can this fade away? Since I was a kid, now the rules
Hey, there we go. Okay, things are working now.
Okay.
But yeah, no, ever since I moved here in like February, and I've noticed as I've seen more and more tours get announced that like a lot of things don't come through Minneapolis, at least not like on the first album tour. It's usually like the second or third round of the cycle.
Right. It's just slightly inconveniently placed, but only slightly. You know what I mean? It's like just out of the way.
Yeah, I mean, and it's weird for me. I lived in Boston for about 5 years, and that's like, everyone goes there for every tour goes through Boston. So coming out here, it's been a big change of pace where it's like, oh, bands only come here maybe once a year, if that.
Right, and it also really like it depends on the style too. I get the vibe that like the indie rock bands go there more often. There seems to be more of a vibrant scene there for that stuff.
Yeah, it seems to be indie rock and oddly enough, like hip hop, like just every rapper you can imagine.
Interesting.
And they all sell out. It's crazy. Minneapolis has the second most theater seats in America next to New York City. So there's a lot of people that come here and play these like really big rooms for no real reason.
Huh.
Yeah, that was a fact I learned this week, so I've been repeating it a lot.
Nice. Yeah.
You know how it is as you get older, you pick up less like interesting facts, I guess, day to day, and when you find one, you're like, have you ever heard this?
Yeah.
Let me share the thing I learned this week. Oh man, so I've been listening to Vacancy for like 2 weeks now.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, Monica.
Like trying to understand it, or because you like it?
I like it, and I like to pick it apart. The first time I looked at the track list, I jokingly said, I thought It's Not As Depressing As You Think could likely be the title of your career. Every Bayside album could have that song.
That's great. When I first wrote that, I demoed it at my house. I sent it to the band and to our producer Tim, and Tim just responded. His email response was just, "But it is ... And then the whole time we worked on the record, and whenever we got around to that song, he'd always be like, "This song is so depressing. Like this is totally mistitled." But I stand by it. I still disagree.
There's a little silver lining to it. It's almost like if there were a bonus track, that would be the title of the bonus track. But ... but it is.
Right. But the idea of the song really is that like, yeah, like shit's depressing, but whatever, just fucking make the best of it.
Well, you read that title, and then the very first line is like you describing your burial, and it's like, yeah, okay,
right.
Sure.
Well, imagery.
Imagery, exactly. Imagery.
I gotta put you there. I gotta start out. I gotta put you there, and then I'll say what I got to.
It's a powerful record, man. I've been going through it. I've been through it a lot of times now, and each time I find a new line in a different song or something that I kind of walk away and I'm like, this line pretty much summarizes the entire album, and I feel like you do that a lot. Like the album, it's a very consistent themes throughout the record, where it's like this kind of represents the entire. Every song feels like it represents everything you're going for in the album. Yeah,
it's definitely the most thematic record that I've written, for sure. Like I always try to write from experience and it's just kind of things that I've gone through, things that are on my mind, but this is the first time I really wrote a record about one certain thing while I was going through that one certain thing, not in hindsight and not, you know what I mean? I wasn't telling a story about something that happened in my life or anything like, or recounting something. It was literally like I was writing things. I was saying things to myself in my head. I'd be laying in bed and saying things, and I'd write them down, and the next day it would be in a song, And I was having conversations with people about what was happening, and things I was saying out loud to them, or they were saying to me, wound up in songs,
Yeah. So when did this start? So when do you go to Tennessee?
I moved to Tennessee in February. It was February of 2014. So like 2.5 years ago. 2.5
years ago. All right. And so then when did you really start? I know you know that you were writing to kind of deal with everything that was happening. So when did this start forming it as like, okay, this is going to be the next album, as opposed to I'm just writing songs?
I guess when, never really. Not until I had a batch of songs. I was just writing because I had a lot on my mind, and I was very like, kind of bored and isolated, and I had nothing to do, so I just wrote. I was writing and writing in this little apartment that I was kind of stopping over in for a few months. And it just had like a couch and a TV and a bed and my computer and my guitar. So I all my stuff was just kind of in boxes. I didn't unpack it. I didn't decorate. I never really moved in. I just sat there for a few months with a bed and a computer and just did nothing but write, and once I had a batch of songs, I said, all right, I guess that's what the whole record, I guess this is what the whole record's about. It's about me sitting in this apartment.
So at what point does Jack move down to Tennessee? Is that far into this process?
No, Jack actually moved a few months before I did.
Oh, okay. Okay. So was he trying to sell you on Tennessee when you were? I know why you moved to Tennessee, but was he like, no, you'll like it here?
No, we kind of planned on doing it at the same time. I had a house built here, so that's really why I had to. I just had to wait a few extra months before. He came down. He bought a house and came down and moved into it. I was building something, so I just had to wait for that. We basically had talked about coming down at the same time. Really, it's not about not liking Tennessee. It's more about like I came down with my family. You know what I mean? And we're making a life here and figuring it out, and also with the idea that I was only going to be here for like 2 years. So then what really sparked everything that the record talks about was splitting up with my wife and then having to stay here without her, and just basically being like, okay, well now what? You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to be here if it's just me. You know what I mean? And also coupled with like, okay, well now I also have to like be here indefinitely, and I definitely haven't planned on being here indefinitely.
Was that a hard thing for you to realize? Because I know like you've called New York home for so long. Was it weird to be like, oh, I'm not gonna go back, at least not anytime soon, in like a long-term sense?
Oh, that was like the heaviest realization. Like that's like Pretty Vacant, the song Pretty Vacant, where they're like, I can't believe this is my life. Like that's literally something I was speaking to myself at the moment of realization, like, of like, oh my God, I can't leave. Like I have no control over like where I live, what I do, and how long I do it for. Like I'm just actually sitting on a train right now that like I have no control over. It's just going to go where it's going to go now.
Mm. And it's weird when you find yourself in those positions, because I mean, and the part of the reason you're kind of stuck on that train is because there's that sense of responsibility to like your daughter and stuff, and that's not something you've really had to like that probably wasn't a realization you faced in the past many times, or it's like, to do the right thing, I got to be on this ride.
Well, there's certainly when you have a kid, there's the constant like, I got to do the right thing. You know what I mean? It's for her. Every decision she has to come first. Every decision, anything I do, anything from as small as like, should I go out for dinner tonight? Or you know what I mean? Should I go out and see friends tonight?
Yeah.
Or should I stay home with her? Or, anything from that to what state should I live in, to like, can I go on this tour? You know what I mean? Should I be going on this tour? Is it worth it? Is it worth leaving her for 6 weeks? Every decision, like, she's the first thing I have to think of. So it's not like that was a big change, because that's been a few years now of thinking that way. It was just more like, still, I've always kind of prided. I guess it has a lot to do with pride, because I've always prided myself on sort of having my shit together. I've never been like a big drinker. I've never been a big partier. I've always like taken my career very seriously, and I have good credit. You know what I mean? It's like,
exactly.
I've always prided myself on having my shit together, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, my life's out of control. You know what I mean? It's like my life is actually out of control. It's actually just gonna do whatever it's gonna do now, and I have to like hold on.
And life kind of sneaks up on you like that. Like it never just happened. Like you don't realize it the second that it kind of goes into chaos. You are like deep in the chaos by the time you're like, oh shit, like this is
yeah. I mean, I'm a heavy planner. I plan everything. I plan absolutely everything. I don't wing it. Like big things and small things. The whole move to Tennessee was, I'm building a house. this is the day that I'm moving. I got to move out of it. I got to move out of my house in New York on this day, and this is how I'm going to get there. And then I'm going to get there, and we're going to live in this house for about 2 years. And my wife is going to open this tattoo shop, and we're going to get the tattoo shop off the ground, and then we're going to move back to buy this house in New York, and move back to New York and live in that, and then rent out the house in Tennessee for this much. You know what I mean? Like very closely planned. You know?
Yeah.
And from big life events like that to last night, I DJ'd at emo night at an emo night here in Nashville, and I spent the whole day making my playlist. You know what I mean? Like I don't show up and just sit and play whatever comes to mind. I plan everything. So for me to just be like, oh my God, I just know, so now I just go with the flow. I just hold on, you know, and I've never been really like a go with the flow kind of guy. I plan everything, even things that you wouldn't think need planning. I want conversations and meetings, everything. I already know what I'm going to do before I get there.
Yeah, but planning, in my experience, planning is like the only sense you can feel of like having some control in your life, where you're like, no, this is the plan, and that's as much control as you can really get in any situation.
Right, and you could sort of, and you sort of like go with the flow, like once it's happening, and you can kind of vary from your game plan, but you still need sort of like a game plan. You know what I mean?
Exactly. So when you find yourself in this chaotic situation, like what is the thing that helps you kind of figure out how to get through it to like the other side, and you know, then get kind of into going with the flow? But how do you get to that? Is that what this record is about? Is finding your way through it?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I think that what really helped me get through everything was, you know, sort of like, I guess, manning up in a sense. Was I just stopped myself from being so depressed about it, and I said, I'm doing this for my daughter. Either do the right thing or don't. And if you're going to, then don't like martyr yourself over it. You know what I mean? Like, you're doing the right thing. You know, you're doing the right thing. Now just shut up and do it. You know what I mean? Like if I'm going to martyr myself about it, I might as well just not do it. You know, if I'm going to do it, then just do it and shut up about it.
So how did Jack and the rest of the band feel when you started sharing the stuff that you had been writing in this room by yourself?
It was definitely a lot of like email responses of like whoa and stuff like that. You know, I think you know, they all know my ex-wife, and I mean definitely it was a really, really conscious effort to not write the record about a breakup and write more about like the aftermath and putting it back together. You know, I wanted it to be about me and what I was going through afterwards, and putting it back together, because that I feel like is very relatable. Like, you know, I feel like there's a lot of people can relate to like that moment where their life changes and they have to figure it out, or just simply being like a stranger in a strange place. And that's really how I feel even to this day. You know, like being in Nashville. You know, and to be fair, I go back to New York very often. I spend like probably close to a week out of every month back in New York, you know, so I still get to see all my friends. I still get to see my family. I bring my daughter back there all the time to see everybody. So it's, you know, I've figured out how to keep like the things that make me happy as a part of my life. But I still feel very out of place here. Very, very out of place. It's very strange.
Yeah, you know, working in the industry, I've considered moving to Nashville a few times, and every time I've visited, I've never been able to see myself living there. So I can imagine, like, even after moving there, being like, it's hard to feel like it's where you belong sometimes.
I do love it as a place. I really do love it.
Yeah,
you know,
it's beautiful.
For me, the problem is more like kind of missing everybody and all the places and people and things.
The routine of
back home.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's more. That's more sort of what I'm dealing with. You know, and also just kind of like an isolation feeling. But I do like it a lot as a place. But it's not home for me. You know, so it's not about disliking Nashville. It's more about like how I feel being here.
It's more, yeah, it's the whole thing. And I like that bit about how you didn't want to write like a breakup record. I can imagine, you know, going into album 7, you would hope that you're not writing just breakup albums at this point.
Right. I mean, and definitely when I almost feel like when I was younger, that's what I had to say. Breaking up with my girlfriend when I was 22 and writing the self-titled record about it Like that would like that was the most important thing in my life when I was 22, was that I broke up with my girlfriend. I had to tell her that she sucked, you know. But like that's not like I've as you get older, like you learn that life is more complicated than that. You know, you start our record sort of evolved, and when I was writing about relationships later on, it sort of morphed. It went from the self-titled record, which was like, you know, we broke up and you broke my heart and I hate you for it, you know, and then it morphed more into like, okay, well, with like Walking Wounded, for instance, it was a little more like, okay, well, what did I do to contribute to this, you know, like how, like the relationships aren't always so one-sided like that, you know, and I think you learn that as you get older too, where I gotten to the point where it was more like, okay, the relationship really doesn't matter. And that's where I am now. It's like the relationship, that's not what this is about. You know, it's more about like my life and my happiness, and it's bigger than that. It's bigger than what did you do? What did I do? You know what I mean?
No, definitely. And I've seen that in the music. You change that perspective. And on this record, there's a little bit of like, what did I do? But then there's also there's that element of like, you looking for answers, and like, you know, maybe it's not me and it's not you, maybe it's just these things, sometimes things fall apart, and the coming to terms with that, like sometimes things don't work out and I have to like learn to accept that fact.
Yeah, and like there's the one song on the record that really does get more into detail about what happened is Rumspringa, you know, and I definitely want to go back to your question. When I sent that to everybody, they were like, wow, you sure like you want that song out there, you know, even like
straightforward
friends. Yeah, it's like friends that I played it for, like who aren't in the band, said like kind of the same stuff. Like I was even at a point, the first time in my career where I was like, I don't know if I should put the, like I'm second guessing this, you know what I mean? And then I spoke to some people, like, you know, Tim, especially our producer, was like you got to say what you mean, man. You know, like you like definitely don't censor yourself, you know, say what you mean.
Yeah. What made you choose the title Rumspringa for that? I'm from like Amish country in the Midwest, so I understand what that is, but I was like, oh, this is an interesting choice for this title.
Yeah, well, you know, and again, I don't, the same way that I didn't want the record to be about my ex-wife or to go into like a whole lot of detail about that stuff. You know, it kind of, I guess all the interviews in the press sort of follow a similar thing where, you know, I don't want to go into like a whole lot of detail about the relationship, but it is kind of, you know, I think if you listen to like the first verse, so the first couple of lines of that song, I think it sort of explains how it correlates to like the Amish Rumspringa, you know.
I just hope it makes more kids look that up, because it is so bizarre in that culture. It is interesting to see.
Yeah.
You know, I wanted to talk about something I really love about the record. I love I've Been Dead All Day, mostly because I don't know how many artists in 2016 could fit a reference into Abraham's journey to Canaan into a verse. And I was just like, man, there's a God reference in the first verse, you get Abraham in the second, and then we go to you're literally praying in the third one.
Right. Yeah.
What's the motivation there? Is the religious thing just a tool to kind of get across your frustration, or something more?
I mean, definitely, I guess, you know, to go to, first of all, to get away from the emotional part of the record, which is what we've been discussing, and get to the technical, because I definitely consider myself like a student of songwriting, you know. Yeah. And I love songwriting. I love wordplay. I mean, there's like time signature changes in that song and all kinds of kind of wacky, like heady songwriter stuff. So one of the techniques that I really wanted to use throughout the whole record was to sort of come up with like a theme for each song, that like as far as the metaphors and the references went, you know. So like, and then stick to that for the song. So like that one, yeah, it's definitely, there's like the religious theme, but I'm still telling my story. I'm using like sort of the religious references as a theme, because like you said, that's what it does to the listener. Like you notice like, oh, this verse he does this, and then this verse he does this, and then he's doing this in the bridge, and you know, that's the kind of stuff that like makes you listen to a song over and over, where it's like there's layers, you know, there's layers to figure out. And then like within Enemy Lines, there's a lot of war references, you know, it's just kind of about a battle. And then there's the march on the snare drum. There's like the Civil War march kind of thing. And, so yeah, I mean, that was, as far as like from a technical standpoint, that's kind of what I was doing through the record and with Dead All Day. And then, I mean, as far as why the religious references and why those specific ones, that's something that I've definitely touched on a bunch throughout our career. And my stance on religion has always been that I'm fully open to it, but I just don't, it's not speaking to me. And I've written songs before where it's like, man, if you're there, like, now's a good time, you know? And that's, you know, like I want you to be there, you know, I just nothing has told me that you are though. And that's, you know, and that's really that's how my stance on religion has been throughout our whole career, you know? And I have touched on that in other songs, but I mean, I think that the bridge of Dead All Day really kind of sums that up.
I just the Abraham reference got me so good because I was brought up in like a super Christian household and then kind of came to being in the place where you are myself, and so when I hear that, it's like you have all that information still stored in the back of your mind, and my brain's just like, oh, I know what he's talking about. I can tell you the entire story of Abraham going to Canaan. And I was like, what a fun reference that people might not appreciate the depth of how much it works for like the story you're trying to tell.
I know. I definitely have a sense of being a little like brainy in the lyrics, maybe overly brainy to where some people don't know what the hell I'm talking about. Our Shep Goodman, who's like he's kind of my mentor. He really like taught me how to write songs. He's produced three Bayside records. Like I said, I met him when I was like 21 and still just figuring out what the hell I was doing. And he really taught me how to write songs. Even to this day, I still go up to his studio. I was there 3 weeks, you know. He produced a self-titled record, which in 2004, or 5, which was like really our coming out party. Even up until like a couple of weeks ago, I was writing songs with him. But he writes pop songs, you know, and my sort of punk influences and my like super musical influences, and he taught me how to mesh that all with pop, you know, and all. That's where really all the structure and the wordplay and the catchiness sort of came from, was my relationship with him. And I'd be singing songs in the booth, and he'd be like, dude, like, nobody's gonna get this, you know. He wrote songs for Mandy Moore and Aaron Carter and all these. He wrote Best Day of My Life for American authors. Like, he writes these massive pop songs that, you know what I mean, that are just so incredibly accessible. And he's always giving me shit about like the strange references and the heady ideas.
I mean, I like it as a listener because it gives me something to, like, you know, dig my teeth into the song. There's always another layer to kind of peel back and be like, oh, this is this is something he's going for, or, you know, tie together the references and how they fit into the bigger picture of the record.
Yeah, and that's a big part of our career, I think. You know what I mean? I think that's why part of why we've had the longevity that we've had, and we have the diehard fan base that we have, because there are those layers, and you can keep listening, and there's a bigger appreciation than you listen and you know the chorus the first time you hear it, and it's fun and you dance to it or whatever. You know what I mean? I think there's a different relationship to the music because of that.
I agree. Now, when you talk about his influence and the poppiness, is his influence the kind of thing that gives us a song like Mary? Because that's kind of the poppier song on the record, and it feels like it's just straight up storytelling.
Yeah, that was just sort of like an experiment for me to do the storytelling thing. I've very rarely done that in Bayside songs before, where I tell a story instead of talk about ideas, or like most Bayside songs are just kind of journal entries.
Yeah.
And Mary was definitely like an experiment for me as far as like trying to tell a story. Also just like messing around with a different style. You know, we 7 records in, we wanted to try and change up stylistically a little bit. So yeah, that song was a kind of an experiment. We wrote it in the studio. It was like, I had the verse and the chorus written. I had the chords and the melody. I didn't even have lyrics yet. It was just sort of like a little idea. It was like a voice memo in my phone when we were in the studio, and I played it for everyone. And everybody's like, oh yeah, we got to work on that. Let's work on that, you know? And then we did it and we said, okay, cool. It's good enough to put on the record. But it was an experiment. It was just something that we were trying out in the studio and it came out cool. So we used it.
Yeah, it's a song that I come back to a lot. It's a lighter moment on the album, but it still fits in thematically because there's that whole fighting off the world and kind of being yourself and finding yourself and accepting that. That's something I was like, I feel like every Bayside album, there's one or two songs where you kind of be like, oh, so this is almost like a teaser for maybe where the band will go in the future. And that's a song where I was like, oh, they could do more of this and I'd be okay with that. Like this works well.
That's interesting. Yeah. It's funny. That's another thing, you know, even when I write songs that sound happy, like Mary, or I think The Ghost is probably the prime example on the record of like the lyrics are so incredibly sad. When I listen to it now, I'm like, God, this is like this is coming from the most pitiful person in the most pitiful point of their life. But it's so happy and like it's like a party song, you know what I mean? But it's like it's so incredibly sad.
But that contradiction is what makes like the best songs so good.
Totally.
Is that you feel like it's something special, and it is something special, and then the more you listen to it, you're like, oh, this is horribly depressing.
Yeah. That one is probably melodically the happiest sounding song, and lyrically the saddest. That song on the record is the two most polar opposites.
There are two other songs I kind of wanted to touch on because we already touched on the last one. We touched on Maybe Tennessee, Rumspringer, I've Been Dead All Day. It Doesn't Make It True. This is another one where I feel like there's a lot of layers to it because I love the idea of the boys versus men and this, if you feel there's something missing, there probably is, because I feel like that's something that you think about a lot when you're younger, and it's not until you have really reached into adulthood that you kind of start to be like, maybe that thing is there, but it doesn't mean that I have to, like, I also know what the answer is to what that is.
Right. And that's something with all the politics that are happening right now, you know, between the presidential debate and the gun control arguments, anything from that to women's rights, to gay rights, to everything that's happening in the world, all the way down to like what's happening in your personal life, fighting with your girlfriend, fighting with your boyfriend, whatever it is. Like, I think that it's like first understand that you don't know the answer, you know, and then go from there. You know what I mean? Going into any of those things, whether it's a fight with your girlfriend or a political argument, first understand that the answer is much more complicated than the first thing that comes to your head, you know? And once you recognize that, then you could start critically thinking about where to go.
Yeah, that and that the other, if you feel something's missing in you, the answer is most likely not in whoever the person is that you're projecting, you know, this frustration upon. And I think that's something that takes years to figure out. And once you do, you're like, oh, I can have relationships again with people because I'm not searching for that missing thing in them.
Yeah, it comes from experience. You know, you have to go through those relationships where you're an idiot and they're an idiot, and you have to go through those like moments of frustration with the world, you know, again, political or otherwise. You know, there was something that I had in the back of my mind. I wouldn't say that it's outwardly about this, but certainly the way that women are treated is something on the last record, I talked about it more, and that's something that I had in the back of my mind, and that's where the sort of the boys versus the men thing come into play, you know, and where that sort of comes into play. It's more, you know, I sort of had in the back of my mind like the way women are treated, and you know, just to step up, you know, act like an adult, and that kind of stuff. It comes from experience, you know, and you know, you can't act like a boy your whole life.
It's true. And with that in mind, do you feel like these are songs that you could have written at any other point in your life, or is this something that only comes as like with everything you've been through?
There's definitely no way I could have written any of these songs in like earlier in my career or when I was a younger person. It all comes from experience and sort of moments of clarity of like, fuck, I don't have anything figured out. And that's the crux of, you know, 10, 12 years ago, writing records about what my ex-girlfriend did to me. And fast forward to now, that's the crux of it, is realizing like, well, I don't know what she was thinking. You know, I don't know what I did to bring that on. I don't know what the world did to bring this on. You know what I mean? Like it's way more complicated than that. It's way more complicated than something she said to me in a phone call. You know, that's not what this all comes down to.
It's yeah, no, definitely. And as a creative person, that's to me when you realize that you're doing something you couldn't have done in the past. That's the sign of like, oh, I'm still growing and progressing. Because so often you're like, am I just spinning my wheels doing this one thing with my life? And then you write something and you're like, oh my gosh, I couldn't have done this before. So I'm still developing.
Well, I think to be a good lyricist, you have to be you have to be capable of being your own therapist. You know, you have to dig it. It's not as simple as just like, so, you know, if you didn't think that way, you know, you do have the luxury of like ignorance is bliss. You know, you have the luxury of being like, well, my hands are clean because I didn't do anything and she did it, you know, or like the world is this way. And anybody who's pro this or anti that is ignorant, you know, cause this is how I feel. And you're just ignorant if you don't get that. Like that's a luxury to think that way. You know, if you want to be a good lyricist, you got to think much deeper than that. You got to think, why do they think that way? Why do I think this way? Why do I feel this way?
And I feel like that's pretty evident on tracks like The Ghost on this record, where you're basically taking yourself to therapy.
Yeah, I mean, that's all my songs, really. Like I said, I think to be a good lyricist, you need to be willing to and able to dig deeper than this is how I feel. So I'm going to write it down.
Moving beyond just the songs, why Tim O'Hare to do this record as producer?
Because something that has always like been there in our career is like I'm a big fan of show tunes, and I'm really, really influenced by show tunes. I love what they do musically that nobody in our world, you know, whether it's in the punk scene or wide or just the greater rock scene or pop or whatever. There's things in show tunes. There are different rules to show tunes, almost in the sense that there aren't rules. And I've always loved that, you know, ever since like The Walking Wounded, really, I've messed around a lot with just throwing different styles into songs and having these kind of big departures and movements almost. You know, when you listen to a show tune, it's almost like it tells a story musically before you even involve the lyrics, you know? Like it could start out this way and then it moves into this, and then there's a new movement. And it's similar to like classical music where, you know, it goes in movements, you know, not necessarily like here's the verse, here's the chorus, here's the verse, here's the chorus. I've always sort of messed around a lot with that. And Tim did a lot of great rock records. He, you know, Say Anything is a Real Boy is like a fantastic record. He did a lot of really cool indie rock. He worked with Superdrag, who I love. So he did a lot of really cool rock stuff. But recently he was nominated for a Tony for Hedwig and the Angry Inch. I was like, oh my God, like this is a guy who's going to get it. You know, like I've worked with pop guys, I've worked with rock guys, and there's always things about my songwriting or my styles that I work with where people don't always quite get what I'm going for. You know, like why would you, like, this bridge sounds like a different song. It doesn't fit the song. It sounds like you turned it into like a completely different song. You know what I mean? And like when it comes to rock or pop, that's against the rules, you know, but that's exactly what I want to be doing. So with Tim, I was like, oh my God, he's going to get it. You know what I mean? It's like I'm basically writing show tunes, but they're angry and they're fast.
No,
you know, like Dead All Day. Dead All Day is a show tune. You know what I mean? You slow that down, and you take the guitars out of it, you know, and if you were to play that song on, like, if an orchestra were to play it or something like that, like that's lyrically, melodically, thematically, everything about it, like that is fully a show tune, and that's kind of what that's what I like to do. You know, I like to write show tunes and speed them up.
I like that. That should be the new bio for Bayside. Yeah. Love show tunes. We're sped up show tunes.
Yeah, and Tim, you know, Tim had his foot in a lot of different worlds. He's done pop stuff and he's done rock stuff and he's done show tunes, and it was like, all right, cool. Like he hits all the marks, all of our influences. You know, that's what we're kind of going for. A rock band with pop tendencies, that is influenced by show tunes, and you know, real kind of show. What I love about show tunes is just how dramatic they are.
Well, I think there's
Like you just really feel it. You really feel the story.
Yeah, you feel the story, and you know that when you're listening to an a cast recording, you know that there's all these visuals and there's production and all that, but you can listen to just the album and you can get the entire, very, very usually complex story is translated over like, an hour and a half of music.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm the same way about show tunes. So when I saw that, I knew him from doing Hedwig, so I was curious. I was like, well, I know he did this Say Anything record that's really good, and it makes sense. That makes sense too. And I was like, but maybe he's just a Hedwig fan. That's fine. I like that.
Yeah, that. I mean, we were stoked about him. His name was definitely on the short list. Even regardless of the Hedwig thing, and then once we started talking about that, it was like, oh yeah, I mean, like who else is what other producer on this list has experience with that?
And well, I like it. Well, what about the album art? Is this the apartments that you stayed in, or is this just a hotel?
This is where the hotel came from. Was well, obviously, the Vacancy thing, naming the record Vacancy was like sort of a double meaning. It was like kind of the hotel theme, and also like obviously the emotional.
Yeah,
the apartment that I was living in, I moved out of my house in Tennessee, and I was sort of just trying to figure out what was going to come next. I didn't know if I was going to move back to New York, or if I was going to buy a new house in Tennessee, or if I was just going to just rent this apartment for the rest of my life. I really had no idea. So I was just kind of in this apartment for a few months as like a stopover, trying to figure out what was going to come next. And I would always say that the apartment was like my hotel. It wasn't a hotel, it was an apartment, but I always called it was in Franklin, Tennessee, and I always called it the Franklin Hotel because, like I said, I never unpacked, I never decorated, I never like made it my own, because I could have lived there for 3 months, I could have lived there for 10 years. I just didn't even know. So I always referred to that apartment that I wrote the record in as the Franklin Hotel.
Franklin, Tennessee is not the most exciting place to be especially if you're not from there. It's a pretty interesting place.
Yeah, luckily I do have some good friends and people in other bands that all live in town that I was able to spend time with and still do. But yeah, it was kind of this weird sense of living, of just crashing there. You know what I mean? It's like, do I live here? I don't know if I live here. I'm not going to hang any pictures on the wall because, I might just have to take them down next week. I might have to, I don't really want to unpack because I might just have to pack again next week. And, and sort of maybe I'm leaving next week, was turned into like, maybe I'm leaving next month, turned into like, maybe I'll be here for like 6 months.
Yeah. Well, I think, anytime you find yourself in that position, like if you unpack, that you're in a transitional period. And if you unpack, it's like accepting that, like, maybe I'll just stay in this transitional period for a bit. And you don't want that. Like, you mentally don't want that. You got to figure it out.
Yeah, totally. And I had to kind of build up the strength to come up with some like final decisions.
Well, we weren't, so like when I just moved to Minneapolis, we weren't sold on this being a place we were going to stay for a long time. And like there were boxes, like I remember we celebrated when we finally unpacked the last box because it was like, oh, I guess we live here now.
Yeah.
I guess this is home.
Yeah, it's since become home. I still struggle with a lot of the same sort of isolation feelings and all that, but it has become home. I did buy, I've since bought a new house that I live in, and it's unpacked and decorated and everything.
Things on the walls.
There are things on the wall.
Yeah, when you put stuff on the wall, that's really the sign that you're there.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, you're not putting holes in the walls unless you plan on staying.
Exactly. So you guys are pretty much taking the summer off until the tour starts in August, right?
Yeah, we've been doing a few festivals over the last few months, just flying out to do like a festival here and there. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Everybody's just kind of working on their side stuff. I do a lot of writing for other people. I've been concentrating on that for the last little while I wait for the Bayside cycle to start. And Chris has been racing bikes.
Okay.
He joined some bike racing circuit that he's been doing. Jack has a 3-month-old, I think now 3 months old baby at home. So he's focusing on that and spending time with her. I'm spending time with my daughter. Nick's been working on his clothing company. So everybody's taking this time now to kind of focus on the things they do outside of the band. And because we know that once the record comes out, we got to go.
No, I completely get that. Do you you working on any new solo stuff?
Yeah, I'm just starting now. I mean, it'll be a while before that sees the light of day, but I figured I have the time. I'm gonna have to concentrate on the Bayside cycle for the next year and a half.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely something I'm getting a head start on. I'm already starting to conceptualize it and talk to people about it, and started writing songs. But yeah, I'm getting started on it now.
Now, when you start working on that stuff, do you immediately know this is a solo song versus this is something I would use in Bayside?
Yeah, now it is. When I first started the solo project, it was leftover songs. It was songs that I'd written that either the band didn't think they wanted Bayside to do, or just I knew, this isn't a Bayside song. Before I had the solo thing, I just never, I never knew what I was going to do with them. I just had these songs. I was like, oh, whatever, it was fun to write, and it's fun for me to hear, and I'll play it for my friends. But, probably nobody will ever hear these songs. And once I had enough of those, I was like, well, I might as well just make a record. So I did. So that's where that was kind of born out of. And now that I'm 2 records in, I'm starting to write the third one now. It's much more of okay, I'm writing a solo record now. I'm writing a Bayside record now.
That's yeah. I mean, that's good. I assume that being able to split them up like that makes it a little bit easier on you too. Because if you're just writing to write, it's the results won't be as good as if you're just focused on this is a Bayside project.
Yeah, well, I do so many things between the solo project and the band, obviously, and I own a merchandise company in California, and I write for other people, through my publishing deal. I write for things that aren't me or Bayside. So and then I have my daughter, and I juggle a whole lot of things.
Yeah.
So time management is really important. So basically what I do, being the planner that I am, I block out time in advance. I know that in July I'm going to write, I'm going to concentrate on publishing, and I'm going to write for other people through July, and in August and September, obviously I'm doing a Bayside tour. I know now that I have October off. We're doing another tour in November. I already know that. So October, I know I have October off, and I'll start thinking about what I'm gonna spend October doing. So yeah, that time management is blocking out time. So I know, and I could tell you now. I mean, the record's coming out. Bayside record's coming out in August. I know Bayside's touring plans for an entire year starting in August. We already know that we're doing a tour in August and September, and then we're doing a tour in November, and we're doing a tour in January and February. And we're doing another tour at the end of next March. And that brings us all the way to a year from now,
And we'll see where we're at then, I guess.
Yeah. So and then we'll probably do another 6 months of touring on the Bayside record. And then, so I can tell you that in the fall of next year, fall of 2017, I'll probably be tracking a new solo record.
Do you
that's... So yeah, I'm a planner.
Have you caught yourself this year yet realizing okay, this band is old enough to have its own driver's license at this point, and you're quickly approaching that 2-decade mark?
Yeah, it's crazy. When we did the 15-year anniversary tour last year, it was I would talk about it on stage every night, and every night I said it was still didn't feel real. It's such a cliche, but it really does just seem like yesterday. It really does not seem like this long. I started Bayside when I was 17, and I'm going to be 34 this summer. And in 2 years, we've been in the band now for 16 years. So in about a year and a half, I'll have been in Bayside longer than I wasn't.
Yeah.
Which is that's real weird.
That's weird. Yeah, like
that's weird to think that I've just been doing this for most of my life. Like it'll officially be most of my life.
Yeah, officially the majority of your life. Yeah. Well, that's an insane. I hadn't even thought about it that way yet, but yeah, wow. Yeah. That's
super weird that this is just all I know. I've already been in Bayside longer than I ever went to school. So if you think about like how school was like a big part of your life at one point, like this is even bigger than that.
But I guess that's the dream, right? Like that was the dream.
It was certainly the goal. Certainly it was the goal. When we started the band, when we signed our first deal with Victory, we were making our first record. We had long conversations about what are we trying to do here? Because I'm a planner, always have been, you know? So it was always like, we want to be here in 15 years. That's what we're trying to do. You know what I mean? Like at the time, Fall Out Boy was blowing up, and My Chemical Romance shortly after that, and a lot of these bands just really sprouted up and blew up, and it's certainly enviable careers. But we were saying like, well, Bad Religion's been a band for like 20 or 30 years, and Social Distortion's been a band for like 30 years.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, how cool would it be to be 50 and still be in Bayside? You know what I mean? Like, how cool would it be to be 40 something and still like, this is the only job I've ever had.
Exactly.
That's so weird that this is the only job I've ever had.
And perhaps
like, how cool would it be if it's the only job we ever have to have?
Yeah.
That was always our goal. We always said we want to be Social Distortion. We want to be Bad Religion. We want to be around for a long time. And now, 15, 16 years later, it's like, all right, cool, we did it. Pulled it off.
Pulled it off. There you go. Now it's just about maintaining, hopefully growing.
I mean, that's definitely has always been the plan, was to maintain and to keep making the fans happy and keep making ourselves proud and make our fans proud to be Bayside fans and not embarrassed that they used to be Bayside fans, which happens to bands,
It does.
And our goal is always to make the fans proud and stoked and make ourselves proud and stoked, and never to make new fans. Never. Even when now, obviously it's at a point where it's a really sustainable, I mean, it's a really nice lifestyle that we have for ourselves. But even when it wasn't, and we weren't making a dime, and there's 50 people coming to our shows or less, it was still like no decisions were made in an effort to make more fans.
Well, that's great to hear, man. I always think about the first time I think I met you. It was like a decade ago at this point. The girl I was dating, we had you write something in your own handwriting for her, and you made some joke about how you had horrible handwriting. And then she got that.
I do.
And then she got that tattooed on her rib. So every time a new album cycle comes out and I'm like getting the press copy of it, I'm always just like, man, I hope that Amy doesn't regret that tattoo all these years later. And you haven't let her down yet.
I'm doing my best. There's a lot of people out there with Bayside tattoos, and I'm doing my best to make sure that that they're not embarrassed of it. And I think that's like another, that adds to the longevity. Also, is that like I think the fans trust me when they get that tattoo. They're trusting me to never embarrass them.
And there are a lot of those tattoos.
Yeah, it's so cool. I still get so excited when I see them. It's the coolest thing. I have a couple of band tattoos, and I know what those bands mean to me to have gotten it.
Exactly. All right, man. Well, I don't want to keep you much longer. I know you're a busy dude, as we've just discussed at length. But I appreciate you taking time to talk to me, especially this far out from the record. Monica threw it out to me, and I was like, I mean, if he wants to talk now, we can talk now, but we can wait till August. But I'm happy we did this now before you've talked the album to death.
Yeah, I think we're just trying to spread it out over the last few record cycles. I did almost no press. And with this one, I told Monica, like, I think I want to do a lot of press. I think there's a story behind this record, and I think if you know the story behind the record, it's going to make the record that much more enjoyable. So I want to do more press on this cycle. So with that said, we're trying to spread it all out, because there's been a lot more than usual.
Yeah, it's daunting, and I'm just happy I got to you before you have there's 5 interviews a week, and it's just back to back to back.
Yeah, I'm not burnt yet. You're getting all of me. You're
yes.
not getting you're not getting my all the answers to your questions I haven't said 100 times.
Exactly. Already. That's really the goal.
I'm gonna get to that point where I'm answering the same question for the 100th time, and I'm rolling my eyes as I say it.
I know it always makes me feel rude because I have the, we do this long form thing, so like I've burned through a lot of questions that you're going to get asked a bunch of times. So
I prefer the long form thing. If you haven't noticed, I like to talk. I'm a conversationalist. I love conversations. With anybody, with strangers, with friends, with anybody. So I prefer this. It's much better than like question answer. Like I have all these kind of questions written down. Here's my first question. Okay, here's my next. Like, and they're not reacting to anything I'm saying. You know what I mean? It's all right, cool, man. We could have just did this through email if you're really just not. You know what I mean? If you're not going to respond to anything I say, then I just read the bio. All the answers to this are in the bio. Yeah,
you leave the door open for a follow up, and they just jump to the next question. And you're like, oh. Okay, I guess we're just transitioning.
Yeah, I prefer this, and Monica definitely knows. Like podcasts are almost always a yes. I'm almost always down. So I definitely prefer the long form.
Well, I'm glad, man. You guys are in Minneapolis on this next tour. So I'll see you at the end of August sometime.
Cool.
All right, man. You have a great day.
All right. Take care. Thanks a lot. Bye.